Snow fell heavily, burying the narrow trail that led up the Shiloh Range. The wind howled through broken pine trunks, lashing against the rotting wood of the old Civil War-era watch cabin. On the wall, a faded American flag hung askew, with only 3 red stripes retaining their color. Garrick sat by the fireplace, hands gripping a cold cup of coffee. His face, once printed in newspapers when he was awarded the Medal of Valor in Kandahar, was now just a shadow. Long hair brushing his neck, deep, hollow eyes, and silence. Silence had been his only companion for the past 3 years. After his final mission, where gunfire echoed in the tunnels and his entire unit was wiped out by friendly fire, Garrick left the military without a backward glance. No goodbyes, no funerals, nothing but a file of classified documents nearly blacked out, and a long scar from his left shoulder to the center of his chest. The cabin he lived in had once belonged to his foster father, Luther, a soldier from the previous generation who had served in the Alaska Reconnaissance Unit. Luther disappeared after a congressional hearing, leaving no message. Only a locked iron chest and a note. Truth doesn't need words, only someone who lives long enough to tell it. Garrick had never opened that chest. He lived like a ghost, chopping wood by day, hunting by dusk, drinking by night. No phone, no internet. No one knew he was still alive. But that afternoon, the wind changed in a strange way. From afar, through the sound of howling wind and pine needles clattering like breaking bones, Garrick heard a soft scratching at the wooden door. At first, he thought it was a hallucination. Many things in his head had deceived him over the years. Explosions, screams, his own voice at 27 still believing in honor. But the scratching came again, clear, urgent, not the sound of a bear, not the wind, and certainly not a human. Garrick gripped the pistol beside the table, stepped toward the door. His hand trembled not from fear, but because old memories were leaking through the cracks of time. He opened the door. The wind slapped his face like an icy hand, and in the dim light of the winter dusk, there stood a dog. Large, short-haired, its body covered in snow and blood. Its eyes were golden deep, staring straight at him as if it had known him forever. Around its neck, a torn cloth hung loosely with faded lettering. K9 Unit. Rex. Retired. Garrick said nothing, asked nothing. He just opened the door a little wider, and Rex stepped in. No bark, no growl, just lay down beside the fire, as if it had finally come home. And that night, amidst snow blood and unspoken scars, 2 broken souls met not through a call, but through recognition in silence. Garrick set the razor down on the basin, wiping his hands stained with dried blood and dirty water. Rex lay motionless on the wooden floor beside the fireplace, one hind leg twitching slightly. His charred wood-colored coat was blotched with wounds, scrapes, burns, and a long, partially opened stitch along his lower abdomen. No ID tag, no medical chip. Only the eyes. Those eyes reminded Garrick of Dagger, the K9 dog, who died beside him in Kandahar, 2013. The same eyes, quiet, in pain, asking for nothing except to be trusted. One last time. He quietly pulled out the military medical kit. Gloves, alcohol bottle, suture needle, metal clamps, everything as familiar as his recurring night terrors. "You don't have to bite, kid," he murmured, voice dry as rotting wood. "I was never good at patching up people. But dogs, I've saved before." Rex breathed heavier, but he didn't move. No growling, no retreat. He stayed still as Garrick ripped open the gauze, pushed the needle through flesh, cleaned the wounds with hydrogen peroxide. Even though his eyes tightened, his neck veins protruded, he endured it. Garrick noticed the scar on the lower belly wasn't from battle. It couldn't be. The stitching was too crude, too deep, off-center. Experiment, he muttered, brow furrowing. Who did this to you? What did they turn you into? When he used tweezers to remove a small piece of metal implanted beneath Rex's belly skin, his phone suddenly lit up despite having been dead for 3 months. Garrick flinched. He placed the tiny object on the wooden table, tapped it. A faint red light blinked from within it. It was a tracking device. Rex's body had been monitored. Maybe all this time. Maybe still. Garrick shut off all the lights, pulled the curtains, extinguished the fire. He collapsed onto the floor back against the wall, eyes never leaving the animal who was breathing heavily, yet still watching his every move. No one spoke, only breathing, the sound of a heartbeat, and memory. Rex slowly inched closer, resting his head gently on Garrick's knee. A simple gesture. But for someone like Garrick, it was a miracle. He didn't touch Rex. Just sat there, eyes closed, allowing himself for the first time to let his guard down. And as he drifted into sleep from exhaustion, Rex rested his head on Garrick's legs. Standing watch like an old soldier who no longer believed in commands, only in keeping someone alive. The morning came slowly over the Shiloh Range. Snow still blanketed the trail, but sunlight had begun to pierce through the pine canopy. Garrick woke with a heavy weight on his chest, not from a dream, but from what was lying across his legs. Rex. The dog was still there, resting his head on Garrick's legs as if he hadn't slept all night. When Garrick shifted, Rex immediately opened his eyes, not startled, just quietly alert. Those dark amber eyes reflected the morning light, like 2 pieces of metal worn down by war. Garrick stood, stretched his limbs. The ache in his back from the cold night causing him to pause for a few seconds. Then he walked straight toward the corner of the cabin, where the iron chest had sat untouched and dust-covered for nearly 3 years. The one Luther, his adoptive father, had left behind, before vanishing without a trace. Back then, Garrick hadn't opened it because he felt Luther had abandoned him. But now, with a tortured GPS-tracked dog sleeping beside him, the old soldier's instinct reawakened. Something was connected. He used the key around his neck to unlock the rusted padlock. Inside, a map of the Shiloh forest, a red circle marking an area not found on any modern GPS. A leather-bound journal ink, faded and stained, recording repeated north cabin checks. And a black-and-white photograph, a young Luther standing beside a man in Special Forces uniform next to a large dog that resembled Rex. A faint handwritten note in the corner. Echo, the last time he was whole. Garrick frowned. He remembered Echo. A top-secret operations unit he had heard whispers of, but never saw official records for. They were called Living Shadows, their movements unrecorded missions, non-existent, and when they died, no one knew. He turned to look at Rex. "You came from that, didn't you?" he said quietly. Rex just looked at him, head tilted slightly. No confirmation, but no denial. As Garrick rummaged further through the chest, he found an old USB drive wrapped in silver duct tape, labeled in red marker. "Only when you have nothing left to lose." Luther. He plugged it into his old laptop. The screen flickered. A grainy video played Luther speaking into the camera, his eyes heavy with fatigue. "If you're watching this, it means they've come back. They never let anyone walk away. Echo being disbanded was a lie. Rex is the final product of the Cerberus program, neural-implanted reflex-driven K9 control. But he escaped. And if he found you, then you're the last hope. The screen went black. Silence stretched long. Garrick looked over at Rex, who was now sitting upright, eyes sharply focused on the window. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear. And in the middle of that white silence were human footprints leading from the forest straight to the cabin door. Garrick stood, grabbed his AR-15, loaded a round. Rex stood beside him ready. No command needed, no leash. Just two beings, both betrayed, now resolute not to let history repeat itself. Garrick followed the strange footprints in the snow, moving deep into the Shiloh forest with Rex, running silently ahead like a shadow. Dry branches whipped against his face, but he didn't blink. The instincts of a special ops soldier had returned. Every step, every breath had a purpose. The tracks led north directly into the red-marked zone on the map Luther had left behind. For years, Garrick had avoided that area not out of fear, but because something in his gut forbade it. By midday, they reached a sunken clearing hidden beneath dense fir canopies. At the center stood a rotting wooden cabin absent from all military maps. The door wasn't locked, just barely ajar. Rex stopped at the porch. He didn't bark, didn't enter, just whined softly. Garrick drew his combat knife, gently pushing the door open. Inside it was dark and cold. Mold, charred wood, and dried blood. "Rex, watch my back," he said, not loudly. Rex turned, facing the doorway on guard. Garrick stepped in. His hand skimmed the rotting wall until it touched a framed photo Luther much younger standing between two men in Echo uniforms with an earlier version of Rex in the middle. The small room had nothing but a rusted bed frame, a dead wood stove, and a steel trap door beneath a dust-covered rug. Garrick pulled back the rug. Scratches from metal claws were etched around the hatch. Rex had sensed this before. When he opened the trap door, a wave of rust dampness and the stench of decaying flesh rose up. He shone his flashlight downward. A breath, faint, echoed from the bottom. "Who's there?" Garrick called. A soft knock, 3 taps. Echo's old signal still alive, not trusting his eyes. Garrick descended the iron ladder, gun ready, and at the bottom he saw a gaunt man with white hair, chained by a steel collar, hands tied behind his back. The man looked up, voice raspy. "Garrick, you finally made it." Garrick froze. You're Luther." Luther gave a weak smile, blood at his lips. "That dog brought you, didn't he?" Garrick unchained him and pulled him up. His body was skin and bone. "They thought I was dead. But I waited for you. Only you could reach this place without satellite detection. They believed no one remembered Echo Cabin existed. Who Luther closed his eyes, breathing hard. Victor betrayed us. He's alive. He runs Cerberus now." That name sent a chill through Garrick. Victor, the man closest to him. The one who had saved his life at Marja Pass. The one who vanished after their final mission, listed as MIA. Luther strained, stuffing a weathered leather journal tied with paracord into Garrick's hands. The original records on Rex, on everything. If you survive today, don't let this story stay buried. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the distance. Rex howled. Garrick scrambled back to the surface. Looking south, black smoke was rising from the direction of his cabin. They'd been found. Garrick hoisted Luther over his shoulders, breathing hard. "They're coming," the old man wheezed. "Destroy everything, if you have to." Garrick clenched his jaw, signaling Rex go to the cabin. Get the red bag. Fire. Rex shot off like a bullet, and Garrick turned his back on the bunker full of ghosts carrying the last man alive who knew the truth. In his mind, Victor's old words echoed. Not everyone who survives gets to be called a soldier. Only the ones who dare to go back. Dusk fell quickly over Shiloh, but the sky burned red like blood. Garrick ran through the forest with Luther on his back, like reliving a nightmare. The old man's breath grew weaker, but his hand still clutched the leather journal, as if letting go would mean burying the past forever. As they neared the cabin, Garrick came to a halt. Fire. The entire shack was engulfed in flames. The door blasted open wooden walls, reduced to ash-black smoke, curling thick into the sky. But this wasn't a natural fire. It was controlled demolition. There were traces of military-grade gunpowder, and Rex was nowhere to be seen. Garrick's heart pounded in his chest. He set Luther down behind a dirt mound, drew his weapon, and crept toward the burning cabin. A dark figure emerged from behind the flames, tall, wearing a long military coat, half his face covered by a tactical mask. He stood there, silenced pistol in hand, as if he had been waiting. Garrick didn't need anyone to say the name. Victor. It's been years. Garrick. The man's dry voice rang out. You're still alive. And you're still a traitor, Garrick growled, tightening his grip on the trigger. I thought you were dead. Victor walked slowly forward, not raising his weapon. You don't understand. Echo never had a future. I chose survival. You chose to kill your own. No, I chose to save the only thing that could control the world to come Cerberus. And Rex, he's the key. Too bad he found you instead. You touch him, and you won't live long enough to regret it. I don't need to touch him. I just need him back in the cage he was born in. As Victor raised his hand in signal, 3 black-clad men charged from the forest. But they didn't expect Rex leapt from above. The first man went down with a crushing bite. The second was dropped immediately by Garrick's shot. The third turned to flee, but was overtaken by Rex, slammed into the ground, and held there in silence by iron jaws. Victor stepped back, drawing his gun, but Garrick was already close. Move again, and I pull the trigger, Garrick hissed. Kill me then. But Cerberus isn't in me. It's a machine. You're a scratch. You can't win. I don't need to win. I just need to shine a light on the rot. Garrick signaled Rex. The dog released the last attacker and returned to his side. Blood still clung to his muzzle, hot and fresh, but his eyes held no rage, only purpose. Luther had passed out in the distance. Garrick hoisted him again, shouting, Move! 3 figures. A broken soldier, a dying old man, and a dog once turned into a weapon, vanished into the northern forest. Where Garrick knew there was an old Civil War-era tunnel once used to transport supplies. Victor watched them go, blood trickling from his lip, smirking. But you'll never escape Cerberus's shadow. Never. But Garrick tearing through the woods, old man on his side, and Rex at his flank, didn't care how deep the shadows stretched. He knew one thing. This fight was no longer about survival. It was about ending a lie that had lived far too long. The wind howled through the pine branches like a warning from the ancient forest. Garrick crouched low, carrying Luther on his back, running through the thick snow. Rex close beside him, panting heavily with each step. Blood from the old man's shoulder soaked through Garrick's jacket, burning hot, like a reminder there wasn't much time left. They reached a large stone outcrop covered in moss and dead leaves. Garrick knelt and rolled the stone aside, revealing an iron hatch with faded markings. Chapter 9. Transit Line, 1865. A military tunnel from the Civil War. Luther had mentioned it in his notes, a secret route once used by elite troops to move unseen from Shiloh to the borderlands. Few knew about it, and if they were lucky, neither did Cerberus. Garrick pulled open the hatch, and with Rex's help, guided Luther inside. The stench of damp earth-cold stone and rusted iron hit them like the staleness of buried memories. They flicked on flashlights and moved deeper into the earth. The dim light fell on stone walls, engraved with old soldier markings. One line remained clear. If the fire above goes out, believe in the fire inside. The words made Garrick pause for a second. Luther opened his eyes, whispering, "Echo soldiers, once bunkered here. Your father and I used this place to hide everything Cerberus wasn't supposed to touch." Rex led the way, nose down. Ears alert, not a sound. Several hundred meters in, they reached a small stone chamber, rusted iron bed, cracked wooden table, and an old safe caked in dirt. Luther lifted a trembling hand. In there, all of Cerberus's files from 2002. Everything. Every experiment. Every cloned war dog unit. Even the reason why you were never meant to live in peace. Garrick laid him down, began unlocking the safe. The code was his own birthday. Inside a thick external hard drive and hundreds of printed documents from an old military typewriter, each stamped in red top secret, Operation Cerberus, Echo Division. Garrick flipped through the pages. Familiar names appeared. Rex, code KIM47. Victor Ashland, Echo 02. Garrick J. Monroe, Echo 03. Subject deemed unsuitable for neural manipulation. Terminate biological record. Dagger, K9033. Deceased due to refusal of semi-neural integration order. Garrick froze. They tried to control me, he whispered. Luther nodded, trembling. But you couldn't be controlled. Not even if I died trying to remind you. Suddenly, he coughed violently. Blood spilled from his lips. Garrick caught him. No, not now. Luther grabbed Garrick's collar, rasping through his last breath. Bury the past with light. Let the world see. And then his hand went limp. Garrick's heart tightened. He knelt there a long time. Flashlight flickering across the now still face of Luther, the only father he ever had. Rex approached quietly, sat beside him, and placed his muzzle on the old man's foot. No one spoke, no barking, only silence. Until the tunnel trembled. Garrick shot to his feet, the sound of drones overhead. They'd found the entrance. He stuffed the hard drive and documents into his backpack, placed a hand on Rex's head. Let's go, old friend. Now's not the time to fall. Rex looked at him, and in his eyes was no longer the gaze of a dog, but of a comrade. Garrick gripped his rifle, tightened his backpack straps. Above them the fire would rise again, but this time he had the truth. And Garrick wouldn't run anymore. The roar of engines overhead made the very stones of the tunnel tremble. Garrick looked up, recognizing the familiar sound. MQ-9 Reaper, a medium-altitude drone capable of surveillance target lock and precision strikes. Cerberus was no longer silent. They had chosen to act openly. Garrick pulled Rex close to the stone wall and opened his old laptop, connecting it to the hard drive. He knew if captured, all evidence would be erased. But if he could upload the data to an external system, just one place, Cerberus would never again have the shadows to hide in. Under the flickering light, the files began transferring. Progress appeared on the screen. 4%. He turned to Rex. You hear that? We're not just running anymore. We're fighting. Suddenly, a deafening explosion tore through the overhead. Part of the tunnel ceiling collapsed. Earth and stone rained down. The network dropped. Transfer stopped at 12%. Garrick grabbed a hammer and smashed open a side passage in the wall, an emergency exit leading to the dry creek bed west of the Shiloh forest. Rex took the lead. No lights, only heartbeats, footsteps, and the noise of darkness chasing close behind. When they reached the exit hatch, Garrick climbed up first. Just as he opened it, he froze. In front of him stood a fully armed Cerberus unit with Victor at the front, his face unmasked. Cold, eyes sharp as a sniper's scope. Getting this far, not bad, Victor said, holding an FN-P90. Garrick raised his hands, unarmed. You killed Luther, he said. Luther killed himself the moment he walked away from Echo. And you, Garrick, you could still come back. You and Rex were incomplete products. But you can be fixed. You can be controlled. You think we're machines. Garrick smirked. No, I think you're the future, as long as you understand who holds the leash. Rex growled lowly. One more step, and he would lunge. Victor gave a signal. The shooters closed in. One squad leader lowered his weapon, firing a bullet into the ground inches from Garrick's foot. A warning. Victor stepped closer, pulling out a neural chip trigger Cerberus's device for controlling war dogs like Rex. One button. He'll return to the form I built. No longer a friend, but a weapon, he murmured, eyes wild. Garrick clenched his fists. No weapons. No way back. But he looked at Rex. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared into his eyes. Just like the first night they met, when trust wasn't an order, but a choice. Do it, Garrick said. Victor pressed the button. Rex shuddered, his whole body seizing like an electric shock. But then, he didn't fall. He looked at Victor, then turned to Garrick, and walked toward him. Victor screamed, "No, no, you're supposed to obey me!" But Rex tore the device from his neck with his teeth and flung it to the ground. Garrick picked up the gun from a fallen soldier, shot the controller point blank. Everything exploded. Bullets tore through the air. Rex charged silent as ever. Cerberus was no longer the dark. They had touched the light. Gunfire erupted like hell awakening in the heart of Shiloh Forest. Rex charged in like a gray storm, targeting Cerberus gunmen caught between explosions, flashing lights, and the chaos of their own making. Garrick rolled right, grabbing a P90 from a fallen enemy, turning it toward Victor. But he had already vanished into the woods like a ghost. He was never one to confront directly, only to strike when the outcome had been pre-programmed for his victory. But this time, he had programmed the wrong man. Rex fought like he understood every tactic the enemy used. No longer just a war dog. He had become a true warrior, a comrade. Garrick fired and covered Rex, retreating step by step toward the rendezvous point near the forest edge, where he had hidden the satellite transmitter module Luther once rigged. It was the only way to upload the data from the hard drive. Under the pale moonlight, the antenna was still intact, covered in moss. He plugged in the drive. A green light blinked. Connection secured. Uploading 12%. 20%. Footsteps echoed from behind. A Cerberus sniper crawled out from a tree base. Garrick managed to dodge, but a bullet tore through his upper arm. He fell. Rex turned, charging. No command needed. One bite, and the sniper never rose again. Garrick winced, blood soaking through his sleeve. He checked the device, still working. 58%. 70%. Victor appeared behind a tree gun aimed directly at Garrick's head. Enough, he said. You can bring Cerberus down, but you won't live to see it. Garrick closed his eyes. 1 second of silence. Rex burst from the darkness, leapt, and knocked the weapon from Victor's hands. They tumbled down a slope. Garrick struggled to his feet, watching Rex and Victor locked in primal combat, growling, snarling, not fighting for survival, but for the truth. Victor pulled a knife, stabbed. Rex whimpered in pain, but didn't retreat. He turned and bit hard into Victor's shoulder, making him scream, the knife falling from his hand. Garrick slid down, grabbed the blade, pinned Victor by the neck. Blood coated both hands. Victor gasped. You're no different from me, Garrick. You kill to survive. No, Garrick whispered. I kill, so no one else has to become me. 1 clean stab. Victor collapsed, eyes wide open, unable to believe death could come from loyalty. Rex whimpered, bleeding from his side. Garrick held him, trembling. No, you can't leave me. Not now. A beep from the device. 100% uploaded. Transmission complete. All Cerberus files sent. Beyond their reach. Beyond the dark. Garrick cradled Rex's head on his lap, whispering, Did it, buddy. The sun began to rise at the edge of the horizon. Shiloh burned red like blood. But this time, it wasn't the blood of war. It was the light of truth. 1 week after the battle in the Shiloh forest, Garrick sat alone on a wooden bench in front of the newly rebuilt cabin, his wounds bandaged, but his eyes still far from healed. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the sign posted by the front door. This place has no owner, only friends. Inside the cabin, Rex lay still on a bed of straw ribs, wrapped in gauze, eyes half closed, breathing steady. Garrick placed a hand on his head. Rest. You've done enough. No one came to visit. No helicopters. No reporters. Only a weathered envelope left at the doorstep at dawn. No name. No seal. Inside, a handwritten letter. The penmanship shaky but deliberate. Garrick. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer alive to say it myself. There were many things I kept from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to have a chance to live free from the weight of experiments, blood, and betrayal. But in the end, it was you, not anyone else from Echo, who held on to what was human. Rex is not just a war dog. He's the last remnant of what we once believed, that loyalty cannot be programmed and life cannot be cloned. Cerberus will fall, because of you. But more importantly, you are still alive. So live, Garrick. Don't just exist like a ghost. Find something that makes you want to wake up every morning, something beyond hatred and duty. I'm not proud of the past, but I'm proud that I once had you on my team. Luther. Garrick set the letter on the table. His hand trembled, but not from fear. It had simply been too long since anyone told him they were proud of him. He looked out at the forest where memories once burned. Rex raised his head, following Garrick's gaze. No command needed, just a look. Garrick stood, slung his pack over his shoulder. Not to run, but to begin something else. When Garrick set foot in the town of Dry Hollow, no one recognized him as the man who had taken down Cerberus. He wore a faded gray shirt, a hat pulled low over his sun-darkened face. Beside him was Rex, his legs still bandaged, but walking steadily. His eyes no longer panicked, but calm, like a soldier who had completed his mission and was now observing the world after war. But Garrick hadn't come to hide. He had come to finish what was left undone. In his pocket was a crumpled slip of paper bearing one line Bradley Coyle, former CEO of Cerberus, now operating anonymously, running a charity in Dry Hollow. A man who once controlled the global K9 bioengineering and cloning network. A man who ordered the termination of Dagger. A man who never stood trial because he retired before the investigation. Garrick arrived at the Foundation's headquarters, a repainted white building with a sign that read, Hope for Animals Foundation. Ironic. He didn't knock. Rex gave a low bark, his nose touching the floor. A familiar scent. Garrick pushed the door open. In the sunlit office, a silver-haired man stood watering plants. At the sound of movement, he turned. Those eyes, cold alert, and not surprised at all. Garrick Bradley. Coyle nodded. I figured this day would come. Because you know the past can't stay buried while someone survives it. Garrick replied. Coyle set the watering can down and sat in an old leather chair. Cerberus has been dismantled. I'm nobody now. I rescue animals. Rex gave a low growl. Garrick stepped forward. You don't rescue animals. You redefined them. You cut-injected, programmed them, and wiped their memories like they were USB drives. Coyle exhaled. You don't understand. I created beings that felt no fear, no pain. I tried to re-engineer perfect loyalty. But, he looked Garrick straight in the eye, I could never program grief. And that's what broke Rex's obedience. When Dagger died, you cried. Rex wasn't trained for that. But he learned it from you. Garrick clenched his fist. I didn't come here for your philosophy. Then what do you want? To kill me, silence settled. Sunlight slanted across the wooden floor. Garrick pulled out a USB drive. No. I want you to finish what you started. Coyle's brow furrowed. The remaining Cerberus data. Everything you didn't turn in. I know you kept a copy to bargain. You're going to submit all of it to the International Court. Now. Today. Coyle stayed quiet for a long beat, then chuckled. You think anyone will believe a deserter like you, Garrick said? Nothing. He clicked on a playback device. Victor's voice rang out, extracted from a camera embedded in Rex's collar. You can't be controlled, not even when I'm gone. I kill, so no one else has to become me. Coyle's face drained of color. Garrick said softly, I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to hear you. Coyle nodded, defeated. No resistance. He typed. The keystrokes echoed through the quiet office as he submitted every password, every access code, to 3 entities. The United Nations Interpol and an international animal protection organization. When it was done, he leaned back, exhausted. You're not going to kill me. Garrick stared at him. I want you to live, so that every morning when you wake up, you remember that what you created saved lives, not took them. Rex gave a soft bark. Coyle bowed his head. Garrick turned away, pushed open the door. Rex followed. The wind blew leaves across the steps. Cerberus had officially fallen. Not by bombs, not by blood, but by truth finally brought to light. 3 months after the exposure of Cerberus, the Shiloh forest had changed. No more helicopters at night. No more smoke from incinerators burning experimental animals. In their place, children's laughter voices calling through old bushes, and now and then, the deep, warm bark of Rex echoing from the small wooden yard nestled between 2 rows of prefab houses. Garrick, wearing a faded khaki outfit, stood before a newly built sign. Echo Haven, Combat Animal Rehabilitation Center. A girl around 10 came running, holding a small dog that had lost a front leg. Mr. Garrick, he's eating again. Rex taught him how to stand on 3 legs. Garrick knelt gently, patting both the child and the dog. Well done. But he's learning from you, not Rex. The girl giggled, hugged her dog tightly, and ran off, leaving Rex lying under a tree, eyes half closed, never taking his gaze off Garrick. After the battle, Garrick didn't return to the military. He didn't accept any medals. Instead, he used the compensation from the Cerberus prosecution to build this place a camp deep in the woods where animals once turned into weapons could return to being themselves. Here, dogs that had been overtrained learned to trust again. Abused animals played without fear of being struck. And children who had lost their fathers in war found a reason to smile once more. Garrick didn't preach. He taught how to wrap bandages, how to tend to wounds, and most importantly, how to understand the eyes of a creature the world once labeled dangerous. Rex was no longer combat dog 048B. He was the soul of the school, the silent mentor, the living proof of a simple truth. Healing is a choice, and choice begins with trust. One evening, as the sunset swept across the wooden rooftops, a group of journalists came by. They wanted to do a feature and asked Garrick, "Aren't you afraid of revenge? Cerberus remnants are still out there." Garrick pointed to Rex, who was lying in the yard, with 3 puppies sleeping on his belly. "I don't teach these kids how to fight. I teach them how to protect. And the strongest form of protection doesn't come from weapons. It comes from compassion." The young reporter paused, then asked, "Do you ever regret no longer being a soldier?" Garrick smiled. For the first time in years, it was a smile untouched by shadows. "I'm still a soldier. The difference is, Bo, now I fight for hope." Rex barked softly, as if in agreement. And in the woods of Shiloh, when night falls, people still speak of a man and a dog, 2 lost souls who walked out of the darkness not to become legends, but to become quiet teachers of trust. Shiloh in the dry season was a land of dust rising with every step, but among the scorched red soil and sun that burned like fire footprints remained clear along the dirt path leading to Echo Haven, man and dog side by side, never apart. One early morning, Garrick awoke to a soft knock at the door. It was Tiara, the orphaned girl who had lived at the camp since she was 8, now 14, with wild curls and eyes that no longer feared the dark. "Uncle Garrick, there's a man at the forest edge, an old man in military gear. He's not saying anything, just standing there, looking at the camp." Garrick froze. His hand holding the coffee mug paused mid-air. He glanced at Rex, already on his feet, alert, but not growling, just watching the distance, as if recognizing an old ghost. Together they stepped out through the camp gate. The man was Major Cole, one of the last 3 senior officers who had once defended Cerberus at all costs. Rumors said he fled abroad, living in hiding for the past 4 years. But now here he stood, his hair fully white, hands raised, unarmed. "I didn't come to start a fight," he said, his voice rough as desert wind. "I came to hand something over. To the right person." He opened a cloth bag and pulled out a sealed red wax folder marked Echo Protocol, Final Debrief. All that's left lists gene codes, burial sites of the animals we left behind. Only I have it, and I don't want to take it to the grave. Garrick said nothing. Rex stood beside him, didn't growl, just stepped forward, sniffed the old man's hand. Once, then turned away. Loyalty isn't for everyone, but forgiveness that belongs to the ones who survive. Garrick took the file, still silent. Major Cole looked around the camp where children now played with once broken war dogs. "You've built something we never believed could exist," he murmured. "A place where violence isn't the first language." "I was wrong." No one's completely right in war, Garrick replied. But after it ends, we have to choose keep destroying or begin to heal. The old man nodded, turned back into the woods. No farewell needed. That file would later be used to develop a new bioethics database, forcing Congress to reopen post-war bioweapon investigations. And the name Rex became a symbol in an international resolution protecting combat animals. A year later, Garrick and Rex walked together down the old red dirt path, once a Cerberus testing ground. Now overgrown with wild grass, but still marked by faint footprints in the dust. "What do we leave behind?" Rex Garrick asked. Rex turned his head toward him, didn't answer, just kept walking, and Garrick understood. Not fame, not medals, but footprints on soil once scorched by war, now green with hope. If you've walked with Garrick and Rex all the way to those final footsteps on the red soil of Shiloh, then maybe you've felt what we believed from the very beginning. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we move forward in the present. There are warriors who carry no guns. There are scars that don't show on skin. And there are creatures like Rex who not only survive, but teach us the meaning of loyalty, forgiveness, and new beginnings. If this story moved you, please don't leave in silence. Like this video if you believe every life deserves a second chance. Comment and share the moment that touched you most. Was it Rex's eyes, the final confrontation with Victor, or simply a quiet breath of peace in the forest? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to help us share more stories that are heartfelt, human, and filled with hope. Because sometimes a single story, even just a few minutes long, can reach the best parts of who we are. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next journey.